The courtroom was silent, not the calm kind of silence, the heavy kind. The kind that felt like a storm waiting to explode. Every wooden bench inside courtroom 3B was filled. Lawyers shuffled papers. A clerk typed quietly. The American flag hung behind the judge's bench like a silent witness to everything that was about to happen. And at the center of it all sat Judge Richard Coleman. For 20 years, Coleman had built a reputation across the city. But not a good one. Whispers about him traveled through courthouse hallways like ghosts. Many black defendants said the same thing. Once you step into his courtroom, you're already guilty. Coleman adjusted his black robe and looked down at the case file in front of him with cold indifference. "Next case," he said sharply. The courtroom doors creaked open. 2 officers walked in, escorting a young black man in simple clothes, a gray hoodie and worn sneakers. He looked calm, too calm. His name was Marcus Carter. He couldn't have been older than 25, but the moment Judge Coleman saw him, his face twisted slightly, the same expression he had shown hundreds of times before. Judgment, disgust. Coleman leaned back in his chair. "What is the charge?" he asked. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the defendant was arrested for trespassing and suspicious activity outside a private law office building late last night." The courtroom murmured. Coleman glanced at Marcus. His eyes slowly moved from Marcus's hoodie to his shoes, then back to his face. "And what exactly were you doing outside a law office at midnight?" Coleman asked. Marcus remained calm. "I was waiting." The judge raised an eyebrow. "For what?" Marcus looked directly at him. "For someone." A few people in the courtroom exchanged looks. Coleman scoffed. "Let me guess," he said sarcastically. "You just happened to wander into a wealthy business district in the middle of the night, wearing that, and expected no one to question you." Marcus didn't answer. The silence seemed to irritate the judge even more. Coleman leaned forward. "Young man, I have seen this story 1,000 times." He tapped the desk. "You people think you can roam wherever you want and then act innocent when you're caught." The words hung in the air. "You people." The courtroom shifted uncomfortably. Marcus's expression didn't change. But several people in the gallery noticed something strange. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't scared. He looked patient. Coleman continued. The arresting officer reported, "You refused to leave the property when asked." "I didn't refuse," Marcus replied calmly. "I said I had a reason to be there." Coleman rolled his eyes. "And what reason would that be?" Marcus spoke quietly. "I can't discuss that yet." The courtroom erupted into whispers. Coleman laughed. "Oh, you can't discuss it?" His voice dripped with mockery. "This is not some spy movie. You are in my courtroom." He slammed the gavel lightly. "You will answer my question." Marcus looked directly at him again. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I really can't." The judge's patience snapped. "Oh, I see what this is," Coleman said loudly. "You think being difficult will make this go away?" He looked at the prosecutor. "These kids watch too much television." Laughter from a few spectators broke the tension, but Marcus didn't react. Coleman flipped through the file again. "First offense," he muttered. Then his tone turned cold. "But attitude like this deserves a lesson." Marcus finally spoke again. "With respect, Your Honor, you may want to reconsider how you proceed." The courtroom froze. Even the clerk stopped typing. Coleman's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" Marcus remained calm. "I'm simply advising caution." Coleman slammed the gavel. "You're advising me." His voice echoed across the courtroom. "You come into my courtroom dressed like a street criminal, refuse to answer questions, and now you think you can give me advice." The tension in the room was electric. Marcus took a slow breath. "I'm trying to prevent a mistake." Coleman leaned forward with a cruel smile. "Oh, don't worry," he said. "The only mistake here was you thinking you could walk around wealthy neighborhoods without consequences." A few uncomfortable gasps spread through the gallery. The judge turned to the bailiff. "Prepare the paperwork." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "For what?" Coleman's voice was ice cold. 30 days in county jail." The courtroom exploded with whispers. "For trespassing," someone whispered. Marcus finally frowned slightly. "That would be unnecessary." Coleman smirked. "You don't decide what's necessary here." Just as the bailiff stepped forward, the courtroom doors suddenly opened. Hard. Everyone turned. A tall woman in a dark government suit walked in quickly. Behind her were 2 men in federal badges. "Stop!" her voice echoed through the room. Coleman slammed his gavel. This is highly irregular. Who are you? The woman walked toward the bench calmly. Then she placed a folder on the judge's desk. My name is Assistant Attorney General Linda Harper. The courtroom gasped. And you're about to make the biggest mistake of your career. Coleman frowned. What is the meaning of this? Harper turned toward Marcus. Misakarta, are you all right? Marcus nodded calmly. I'm fine. Coleman looked confused. Why are you addressing the defendant like that? Harper looked back at him. Because he's not a defendant. The room went silent. Coleman blinked. What? Harper opened the folder slowly. Judge Coleman, for the past 6 months, the Department of Justice has been conducting a federal investigation. She slid several documents toward him. Into racial discrimination in sentencing inside this courthouse. The judge's face slowly turned pale. Harper continued. And Marcus Cartusha turned toward the calm young man. Is one of our lead investigators. The entire courtroom exploded with shock. Coleman stood up suddenly. That's impossible. Marcus slowly stood as well. And for the first time, he reached into his pocket. Then he placed a federal investigator badge on the table. The room went silent. His calm voice filled the courtroom. You just tried to illegally jail a federal investigator. Coleman's hands began shaking. Marcus continued quietly. And unfortunately for you, he nodded toward the cameras installed in the courtroom. Everything you said today was recorded. The judge's face collapsed. Harper closed the folder. Judge Richard Coleman. She paused. You are officially under investigation for civil rights violations and abuse of judicial authority. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Marcus looked at the judge one final time. You should have listened when I warned you. Coleman slowly sank back into his chair. For the first time in 20 years. He had nothing left to say, and his career was already over. For several long seconds, no one in the courtroom moved. The air felt frozen. Judge Richard Coleman stared at the badge sitting on the table like it was something poisonous. Marcus Carter stood calmly in front of the bench, his posture relaxed, his expression steady. The same young man the judge had just mocked, threatened, and tried to send to jail. Now the entire power dynamic of the room had flipped completely. A quiet whisper spread across the gallery. Did she say federal investigator? Wait. The Department of Justice. Coleman's lips trembled slightly. This is ridiculous, he said, trying to regain control of his voice. You can't just walk into my courtroom and make accusations. Assistant Attorney General Linda Harper didn't even blink. We're not making accusations, she said calmly. She opened the folder again. We're presenting evidence. She pulled out a stack of printed documents and placed them on the desk. Over the last 6 months, she continued, our office reviewed more than 300 cases handled in this courtroom. Coleman swallowed. Harper's voice remained steady. And we noticed something very disturbing. She looked directly at him. In cases involving black defendants, your average sentence was nearly 3 times longer than 4 white defendants with identical charges. The courtroom gasped. Coleman's face turned red. That's statistical manipulation, he snapped. Marcus finally spoke again. Actually, it's math. His calm tone cut through the tension. For 6 months we observed, documented, and recorded everything. He gestured slightly toward the courtroom. Every ruling, every comment, every sentencing decision. Harper nodded. And today, she added, was meant to be the final test. Coleman blinked. What test? Marcus stepped closer to the bench. The trespassing charge was staged. The room erupted into shocked murmurs. The officers who detained me were part of the investigation, Marcus explained. We needed to see how you would treat someone you believed had no power. Coleman's breathing grew heavier. You tricked the court, he said weakly. Harper shook her head. No, Judge. Her voice hardened. We gave you an opportunity. She leaned slightly forward. And unfortunately, you confirmed everything we suspected. The judge's hands gripped the edges of his desk. You can't prove bias based on one courtroom conversation. Marcus quietly reached into the folder. Then he pulled out a small tablet. With respect, we don't need just one. He tapped the screen. The courtroom speaker suddenly turned on. And then, Coleman's own voice filled the room. A recording. You people think you can roam wherever you want. The entire courtroom froze. Marcus played another clip. These kids watch too much television. Then another, walk around wealthy neighborhoods without consequences. Each sentence echoed louder than the last, each word sounding worse now than it had just minutes ago. Coleman's face drained of color. The spectators shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even the court clerk stared at the judge with wide eyes. Marcus slowly turned off the recording. "That was just from today," he said quietly. Harper added another stack of documents to the desk. "But we also have recordings from previous hearings." Coleman looked down. Dozens, maybe hundreds of pages. Witness statements, statistical reports, transcripts. Marcus crossed his arms. "For months, people in this city believed they were being treated unfairly in your courtroom." He paused. "Today we proved they were right." Coleman suddenly stood up. "You're trying to destroy my career," he shouted. Harper didn't react. "No," she replied. "You did that yourself." The silence that followed felt enormous. The judge looked around the room desperately, at the spectators, at the lawyers, at the clerk, but no one defended him. No one spoke. Finally, Harper turned to the federal agents standing near the doors. "Please escort Judge Coleman from the bench." The words hit the courtroom like thunder. Coleman's eyes widened. "You can't remove a sitting judge like this." Harper nodded. "Actually, we can." She slid another document toward him, a federal judicial misconduct order. The agents stepped forward. Slowly, respectfully, but firmly. Coleman looked down at the courtroom he had ruled over for 2 decades. The bench that once made him powerful now felt like a trap. His voice came out quieter this time. "This isn't over," Marcus replied calmly. "You're right." He glanced at the folder filled with evidence. "This is just the beginning." The agents guided Coleman away from the bench. For the first time in 20 years, he walked out of the courtroom without authority, without control, without respect. The heavy doors closed behind him, and suddenly the room felt lighter, like something dark had finally lifted. People began whispering again, some shaking their heads, some stunned, some relieved. Marcus slowly sat back down. The adrenaline that had kept him calm all morning finally started fading. Harper looked at him with a small smile. "You handled that perfectly." Marcus exhaled. "I tried to warn him." She laughed softly. "You did." Across the courtroom, an older black woman, who had been sitting quietly in the gallery, wiped tears from her eyes. She leaned toward the person next to her and whispered something. Marcus noticed. "What did she say?" he asked Harper. Harper glanced over. Then she smiled again. She said, "She finally believes the system can work." Marcus looked around the courtroom one last time. At the empty judge's bench. At the stunned crowd. At the place where so many unfair decisions had been made. Justice didn't always arrive quickly. Sometimes it took months, sometimes years. But today, it had arrived exactly when it needed to. Marcus picked up his badge from the table, the same badge the judge had laughed at minutes earlier. Now it felt heavier, more meaningful. Harper closed the folder, ready to file the charges. Marcus nodded. More than ready. Because for the first time in a long time, the man who had abused the system was finally going to face it. And this time, justice would be watching.